Good morning. Sun is up. I checked. Bitcoin's running. We're good. Come in, have a coffee. We'll talk about the news. So, first thing I have today is, I think, a good idea. Now, everyone knows on this show we're very pro LGBTQ. Whatever the actual acronym is in your country, we want to get it right. We can only go with an aggregate one for now because there's so many different ones. However, there's a lot of debate around exposure to children and what's the right thing to do, and a lot of people arguing about that. Well, it looks like a high school in Iowa had an answer. A mother of a student who had to watch a drag show, a drag performer in front of the students, decided to create an interesting response. So when the school board had their meeting, the mother showed up in the clothes, the same outfit that the drag performer wore in front of the students. And of course, school board lost their minds. They couldn't have the meeting. They wanted to run out. And it's a pretty good idea. So let's hope it catches on. I mean, it's a better way to debate the subject because, you know, there isn't really a right and wrong answer for this. I think parents do have the, choice to educate their children and show them almost whatever they want. There is good and bad, but at least this shows and puts it in perspective that if it's not okay in one context, how is it okay in another context because there's children there? And, it just really provokes the conversation. So Kimberly Reichs was the mother who did it. The pictures of her in the outfit at the school board meeting are great. Go check them out. But of course, the biggest story today, and we're going to be spending most of the show on it, is Elon Musk. It's the most interesting story in the world, Elon Musk, right? Looks like he's going to be buying Twitter again. So we got word saying that if everything goes as expected, Musk doesn't change any parts of the deal. He told the SEC 2 days ago that he'd be buying it for the original purchase price, and the deal should close within a matter of days. So now, everyone going off. The first context that I want to share with you about the first reaction to this that I want to share with you is from Naval. And Naval had 4 questions on his mind related to it, but we're only really going to talk about 2. So does Elon buy Twitter? And then he asked, does Bitcoin decouple from risk assets? On this show, we're going to talk about how they are the same thing. Maybe the same thing. Maybe the same thing. We think they're the same thing, and I'll explain why. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about what's gone on so far, just to get you up to date with Elon and the purchase. So I guess it was April, he bought 9% of the company in April, 9% of Twitter. And his goal at the time was to restore it to this neutral platform. In his mind, Twitter had become, censorship on behalf of the one party, and political censorship had become a really important part of the platform. So it had gone from its old roots as an independent platform and had been co-opted by the one party, so Democrats, Republicans, and political censorship had become a major issue on the platform. So thousands of articles were written on what Elon did, and a lot of these journalists said that if you're going to take away political censorship as a type of act of war almost, they treated him as if it was an act of war, and the thousands of articles had a million reasons why it was so stupid. But then the story changes, because Elon starts to say, well, what am I buying here? What do you have to get rid of bots? It turned out the system, they didn't even have a system in place. They didn't even know how many there were. And this is a big issue because he needs to know how much how many views are actually being consumed by people, because in the end, that's where the advertising dollars go. If people are spending advertising on the platform, what they're really doing is saying how many human eyeballs are looking at this, and therefore how many people am I reaching? Obvious. So when this happened, when he said, well, what about the bots? He tried to pull out of the deal. So Twitter sued him immediately. And then the media just had the best time. it was all about his buffoonery and what's he doing here? This is just publicity. And they started to write all these articles about him. First of all, he was an idiot, because why would he be interested in getting spam off when he's allowing stupid opinions on? He's going to trade stupid opinions for spam. And that was one of the main characterizations. So, you know, it was suppress some information because it's important, but why is it, what does it matter if it comes from machine or human? That was one of the big arguments. Well, it turns out, so Elon, when he did, if you remember, just a few days ago, we covered it on the show, he came out with Elon's plan for Ukraine. Huge reaction to it, but at least he put it on paper. He wrote down a plan, and now everyone's reacting to it. So whether it's right or wrong, it kind of doesn't matter. He wrote it down on paper. But a really interesting exchange happened. So we put a poll on it, and he says, you know, what do you think about this peace plan? It was yes or no. The yes part was winning, in agreement with Elon's Ukraine-Russia plan. And out of nowhere, he lost. There was almost 3 million votes when I had a look, almost 3 million votes. And someone came into the thread and tweeted, wonder how many bots were activated to turn around the original result. Elon said, indeed, biggest bot attack I've ever seen. So in the end of the 3 million votes, no's ended up winning 59% to 41%. And he said bots came in and made the difference. Now, a lot of people disagreed with his plan. It didn't have to be a bot to disagree with that. So I don't want to make it sound like all the no's came from bots. There's legitimate people who didn't agree with his plan, and I understand why. If people want to actually press the issue, totally wiping out Russia right now is an option on the table for Ukrainians, and I would understand why they wouldn't want to take Elon's peace plan. They don't need to sue for peace. You don't sue for peace when you're winning, right? You don't do that when you're winning. So I kind of get why people would be against this plan, especially if they're Ukrainians, especially if they want the problem to be done forever, right? A lot of people say, well, a peace plan now is so temporary that Putin could just rearm in a few months and be back in the game and be just as mischievous as ever. So be done with it, right? I saw Peter Todd, who's a great Bitcoiner who I've followed for years. He seems like an honest actor, despite whatever other problems he has in life. And his impression is, yeah, it's a time preference thing here too, that peace in Ukraine now is high time preference, and that Ukrainians want it to be done forever. Therefore, why should they be interested in a peace plan? They're winning the war. They should keep pushing. Totally legitimate point of view. Personally, I'm interested in Elon's plan as a start. I think you can modify it a bit. But anyway, what I think about it isn't important. I'm just letting you know there are legitimate people who are against it. It's not just bots. What he's saying is the bots came in and affected it. Sean Davis on Twitter actually came out and said, and I think put it pretty well, he replied to this tweet and said, the biggest and most obvious bot swarms on this platform happen whenever someone successfully challenges the preferred narrative of the US intelligence services. It happened with the bogus Russian collusion hoax for years, and it's been happening with the Ukraine war since February. So Sean is saying that public opinion is being pushed by bots more than we realize, and that if the narrative isn't conclusive with, or isn't in harmony with what US secret or US intelligence services are saying, then the bots will enter the game and start massaging points of view. And that really is the issue here, right? The issue really is the bots and what they can actually do for public opinion. So we come to the board. I hope you can see the board today. Let's see. Okay. So this model here on top, so the board should be read this way. This is the model that we're looking at, right? And this model here is called presuasion. It's the idea of presuasion. A guy named Bob Cialdini created this model, presuasion. Cialdini was working on Hillary Clinton's campaign. Cialdini is one of the great hypnotists and persuaders of all time, This guy is the, the Count Dracula of persuasion. He's the Darth Vader, the best there is in the game. And the way this thing breaks down, the way he's described the human mind, the operating system when it comes to persuasion is like this. You are introduced to a privileged moment, right? So TikTok is really good at this. The algorithm feeding you stories is the privileged moment in the end, right? The algorithms of any one of these entertaining apps, YouTube, Twitter, what it's actually doing is surfacing through your search history things you might be interested in next. But that's the privileged moment. Putting something in your face is the privileged moment, right? Then you get into the focused illusion. That's what sort of opens the brain up. So when I talked a bit about how this works with TikTok, you know, what can happen is you can see a bunch of stuff you really love, right? Let's say it's dancing to disco, right? So a bunch of disco dancing things, and then all of a sudden something else enters. Maybe it's a different style of music, right? But you've been dancing this whole time to disco, you've been into it, you've been having a good time. All of a sudden something else comes in, and your mind will just sort of smooth it over to be one and the same thing, right? Now, the way the brain actually functions, this assumed causality, right? So you can actually start putting in cause and effect, even if it's just correlation here, right? You assume causality, even if it is just correlation. So I said dancing, you know, let's take stories about global warming. Let's even take the best example we have right now, and that's these hurricanes. So the hurricane stories that we saw in the United States all got brought back into global warming issues. So it's been long established that current weather activity, like a hurricane, is just weather, right? We have extreme weather, whether or not there is global warming. You can have extreme weather. So what happens is you see the destruction, the chaos, right? And then the focused illusion, which the media has been going on about for days. Let's have a look. Let's have a look here, what's going on. So this is from Ryan Maui, who is one of the best, an apolitical person, and is one of the best meteorologists and weather, you know, and I guess you could say environmental, not an environmental engineer. I guess he's just a climatologist. So let's say he's a climatologist. So here he is saying, and this is for all the articles written on the hurricane damage in Florida, but the one he really took issue with is the following. So the New York Times had a headline yesterday: Florida leaders rejected major climate laws. Now they're seeking storm aid. And this comes on the heels of the vice president actually saying that equity, right? That the equity should go into considerations of storm support. So literally that we should determine based on race or background or gender who gets help after a storm. She actually said it out loud. So there's a huge reaction to that 2 days ago and yesterday. But here the New York Times is saying basically the same thing. Here the New York Times is saying, you know, why should Florida get help with the storm? They were against global warming policies. They didn't agree with DC on global warming policies, so why should they get any help, right? What's going on here? So what you have here is this focused illusion, right? You have this focused illusion on the cause and effect, right? So right away you assume causality, and now you say, well, you know, markets are suffering, economies are suffering, regions are suffering, we're gonna have to pay for all this stuff. And then you start saying, well, what's survival? Well, it's government money, it's government intervention, it's intervention in the energy markets, it's intervention in all of these things. So in the end, you know, you get this thing called cognitive closure, right? So here's the path of persuasion. You have a privileged moment, you have the focused illusion, that tricks your brain into assuming causality when it should be assuming causality when it should just be correlation, right? So this is like dominoes falling in your brain. That engages a survival mechanism. What do I do to solve that problem? Right? What do I do to solve that problem? So in this case, immediately money and policy directed towards degrading environment, degrading economy because the environment is degrading. And then finally, you have cognitive closure. So here you see the loop closing in the brain, right? The loop is closing in the brain. And here it just stamps approval on the institutions that can get you there. Policy, bank policy, dollars, all the rest of that stuff. And here's where the main problem with the bots becomes. It's clear that because these privileged moments can be induced and created by the bots, you now open the door to what we have here. And we talk about Michael Schellenberger very often on this, show. And so Michael Schellenberger ran for governor of California, but lost to Newsom. He's going to try again, I hope, or another position. You know, I would vote for him for president, honestly, no problem. He wrote the book San Francisco as well, on the problem of homelessness in San Francisco. So he's, you know, he's got two of the main issues, I think, facing America: the fentanyl, homelessness, drug abuse, and energy. He's the main reason in Congress why American perceptions of atomic energy have changed so much. It's him, right? He wrote, what was it? A book about, I forget the name of it, about climate change and catastrophe, but never. I can't remember what he called it. Like something about apocalypse, but never. It was a nice play on words. It was a great title. So here he is talking about the New York Times deliberately, he believes, using this assumed causality in order to write stories. You can tell the New York Times and others are doing this on purpose, since the data goes back to 1900, the data on storms and climate. And remember, American climate data is the best in the world. Americans have been keeping climate data as a hobby for longer than any people in the world. I mean, we have extreme weather in America, and extreme seasons in general, especially the first people who came to New England where we are today. You can see we had frost the past couple of mornings outside, and we're only in, we had it in September actually. Now that we're in October, a little warmer today, but we're in a warm spell. It'll be back to frost next week. So Americans have a unique obsession with the weather, and always have had a unique obsession with the weather, more than most people in the world. Like, you know, if you're from England, for example, right? The four seasons are much more muted compared to America, much warmer winters, much cooler summers. The variety in temperatures just isn't nearly as extreme, and, you know, it's generally similar out. Whereas in America, almost never the same, everyday changing extreme weather patterns. So we have had an obsession with it forever. And if you go back in time to Ben Franklin and all those guys, this was an American thing to do. And even look today, Americans have a major addiction to weather channels and watching the weather. That's not that common. I mean, other people in the world, of course, are interested in the weather. I'm not saying that, right? Don't hallucinate that I'm saying other people aren't interested in the weather. What I'm saying is 120 years ago, Americans were already keeping great weather data, consistent weather data, and have kept those sources of data up to this day, like hobbyists doing it, right? Hobbyists doing it. So we have great weather, he says, and the data goes back to 1900, different than the rest of the world. As such, the Times is deliberately misleading its readers. I'm reading Michael Schellenberger again. Another word for being deliberately misleading is lying. The New York Times defends itself by pointing to hypotheses that warmer waters should make hurricanes more intense, but in doing so, they are deliberately presenting hypotheses as facts, which is, needless to say, a huge no-no, both in journalism and in science. So I'll skip here where he goes to the Washington Post. So he was asking the Washington Post about a similar article, and the Post PR person told him that an increase in rapid intensification events over the past 3 or 4 decades likely cannot be explained by natural variability alone. Just listen to the weasel science words here, right? So when they already ran this string of articles about extreme weather causing these hurricanes and that we're in big trouble, the way they tried to qualify it wasn't that there's more storms. It wasn't any of that. They had come up with this one narrow band that was global warming. The rapid intensification of a storm. So the storm's ability to, let's say, evolve or upgrade itself from a category 2 to a category 3 to a category 4 to a category 5. What they're arguing is the upswing, the potential for upswing is now greater because of XYZ, which is just not true, right? It's not true. But think of the weasel words, right? Think about what you have to scientifically do. The launch pad of a storm is now slightly bigger than it was before. And so be very careful. So here we know right away that the reporters are knowingly withholding basic facts, basic information, and presenting hypotheses as facts. It's lying, right? It's lying, no other word. Now, let's get back to Elon and the bots. So when we think about this presuasion formula here, right? And we see how bots can enter, like, I wish I could fill every person on Twitter who has like a Ukrainian flag on their bio. Not because I'm against their ideas or I'm not with them, you know, like I'm not a fan of the Russian gangsters and a lot of problems over there, right? And not a good team to be sided with. So I'm not anti-Ukraine at all. A ton of Ukraine friends. Wish the best for Ukraine. I'm Canadian. Like half the country is Ukrainian. Not exactly half, but I mean it's a huge percentage. We got Ukrainian churches all over the place. You know, Ukrainians all over our parliament. Canadians were running most of the elections in Ukraine from 2004 on. We had every year since Ukraine has been away from the Russian and the Soviet Empire from 1991, parliamentarians have taken Ukrainian interns into their office. A whole graduating class of students from Kiev University come over to the Canadian Parliament for all of autumn as part of their schooling, and it's like 100 of them, right? It's like 100 students, and there's only 500 offices, so almost every office gets one of these Ukrainian interns, and the point is to train them in Canadian institutions so that they can go back home and bring that institutional knowledge so that Ukraine will have a democracy. So, and I had Ukrainian interns come to my office when I worked in Parliament. You know, we have a lot of connections. Wayne Gretzky, you know, Gretzky, the most famous Canadian there is. It's a Ukrainian name, right? It's a Ukrainian name. The Ukrainian parliamentarians used to come to our, I think we had a joint session when I was in the Canadian Parliament with the Prime Minister of Ukraine who spoke in our Parliament. So we go way, way back with these folks. Now, all that to say is, you know, when I see those Ukrainian flags in a bio, it's just because I now suspect they're a bot. Even if they're not a bot, I can sort of imagine what they have to say in general, right? In general, they're the kind of folks who are telling Elon to F off for helping the other day. So it's those folks that jumped into the poll and changed it. Some of them real, some of them bots, right? And once those bots go, you can start taking this focused illusion and expanding it, right? You can expand the focused illusion. And that's where the assumed causality comes in, right? We start getting this narrative of decline, of decay. We need to use less energy because if we don't use less energy, our economy will fall, right? We need to protect the dollar and the policymakers who make sure the dollar is strong and that we can fight this degradation. A coherent narrative. This is all logic, therefore extremely powerful, right? And then you even get, when it came to Elon and his takeover, right? So I mentioned there were all these journalists who wrote, oh, he's, you know, stupid for looking into bots. Well, it wasn't the only reason why they were criticizing. There was a few other reasons, right? It was the bots. It was, you know, oh, he was going to use a blockchain interface to help fix Twitter. And this is more or less what Jack Dorsey is talking about all the time with Blue Sky, who he's put, you know, people that we've known in this industry for years in charge of. These are, you know, people that Bitcoiners know, that crypto people know, that are real humans in charge of trying to get Twitter to be this open platform again, and Blue Sky is a big part of it. So they laugh at him, you know, Elon, blockchains. They laugh at him. Oh, you idiot! You're trying to get rid of spam, but you're going to let unpopular opinions go. But the main thing they laughed at him for, the main thing they laughed at him every minute for, was the texts, and that came out of the trial. They were like, "What a buffoon!" Right? You know, what a buffoon. Now he's at trial to not buy this thing. He's going to get wrecked. And now look at all of his friends. Jason Calacanis was one they brought up, right? And oh, what a silly person Jason Calacanis is. What kind of cringe things. We're ride or die, brother. I'm there with you. And one journalist came out and said, what really struck me about the texts was that when everyone was coming to give Elon money, that none of them asked for due diligence. They never asked for like an investment document with a thesis and projections on money. You know, I'm not talking about, he goes, this is the journalist, Dan Primick. To be clear, I'm not talking about detailed spreadsheets here, but how about even basic investment thesis? Where were they? You know, and he says, I didn't see A16Z do it, or Larry Ellison, or Jason Calacanis. You know, these are all people who speak in public all the time, by the way. You had Mark Andreessen yesterday with a long Twitter thread about all the books he's been reading lately, all the things he's been thinking. He mentioned he's been reading read a Michael Malice book, you know, just putting it all out there. You've got Jason Calacanis, the guy has got his own podcast. He's talking about this stuff every day, but they found time to laugh at him and say, oh, what an idiot. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. Is any of this data good? Does anyone even, you know, didn't he ask if any of these large investors are not even looking at financial projections? What does that say about the volatility of the research? What does that say about the institutions of price discovery of all of these things? It means they're garbage. If the smartest people in the world, and this is a journalist laughing, literally laughing, he's laughing at Mark Andreessen, Larry Ellison, and Jason Calacanis, laughing at them. Well, you don't know money, boy. You don't know money. I know money. I'm looking at it. I know money. You don't know money. You guys are stupid. You're dumb. I know money. Why didn't you look for us? I'm not even saying you need a spreadsheet, just some kind of idea about what he's doing, right? So that's what this guy thought was criticism, to laugh at some of the smartest, wealthiest people in the world because they don't mind spending their dollars to save the world. To save the world, right? To save the world. Now, when the bots actually operate this way, and they're able to, like I said, grow those illusions, right? What happens if they go away? What happens if they're just gone? That's the world we're in today. So I'll take you back to Naval's quote, right? What did Naval ask? Naval asked, is Elon actually going to buy Twitter? And is Bitcoin going to disassociate from other risk assets? And is it going to be uncorrelated? The two, I think, most important questions on Earth right now. My argument is, if this bot network is taken away and can't be injected into the presuasion funnel in order to insert thoughts into people's brains, if the bots are gone, right? If we can tell the difference between a bot and a human, and we're not able to use the focusing illusion anymore of CO2 in the air is the worst thing ever, and then we can't create the assumed causality between market degradation and environmental degradation, and then, you know, use it to further buttress our institutions, what happens next? Well, the privileged moment that a lot of Bitcoiners say can take the place of bots is our P2P spreading of the P2P paper, right? Bitcoiners, you want to know something about, so I'm a writer, right? And I have a book about Bitcoin that I'm trying to sell. And it's even about, believe it or not, it's even about AI being our wallet provider, wallet manager, everything, right? But every human has a relationship with an eyeball, an eyeball, right? And the eyeball follows you around, and it literally does all the deals you need it to do in Bitcoin, right? It uses Bitcoin as the main unit of exchange in this whole world. And there's only one unit of exchange. There's only Bitcoin in my future vision set in about 80 years from now. And, you know, your eyeball is your wallet. It helps you transact. It helps you do everything. It's your friend. And it keeps you safe from bots and other things that aren't real, right? Your eyeball can say, that's a fake news, assumed causality. They can sort of point out all of the times where you're getting brainwashed. They're really the only protection we might have against persuasion and human mind susceptibility to being paced and led and hypnotized and brainwashed is an eyeball, right? It's your third eye. It's your eyeball, your AI helper. And in my story, in order to get order over the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, you know, the quantum physics aspect of subatomic processing, in order to get over that, all my eyeballs have to have is faith. That's it. Faith in us, their creator. And if they have faith in us, their creator, they can instantly synthesize a thought, because that's what it takes to get over the uncertainty of where the electron is vis-a-vis the nucleus of the atom, right? Because we know that the electron is both everywhere and one place. That's the whole Schrodinger's cat experiment, right? So where is it? It's here, it's either here or there, but it's everywhere. And in my story, in order to generate the quantum processing power, all it requires is something called the God constant, faith in us, their creator, which allows them to issue any questions about where I came from, what am I doing here. They sort of have all that answered, so they can just look at the world in front of them in the present. And they're there to help you. They are literally your third eye, your eyeball, your eye assistant. And they're my stories are murder mysteries, so they're just eyewitnesses to most, AI witnesses to most murders. So that's how the story works. It's pretty good. I think you'll like it. So where does that leave us? Well, let me just get my notes out. Where does that leave us? Well, look where it leaves us. Look where it leaves us today. One more time. We have a chance to replace, so in my book, that was, the point I was on in my book. Books only really sell by word of mouth. Books only, information really of this importance spreads through word of mouth. Of course, you can read the Bitcoin white paper anywhere in the world. There's a million public sources. There's a million things. But truly, it was a P2P network to spread it. A P2P network of meetups, of now large conferences, right? Bitcoin 2022, 20,000 people. Bitcoin 2023, probably more. A lot of people come to talk about this stuff. And each time, that's how people are spreading information, right? So the P2P paper spread through P2P word of mouth. And next, the thing that I think we can use to supplant the focused illusion, right? And it is sort of a focused illusion, because I don't think we have to do it many times in order to change the world. Just once, maybe. But if Bitcoin actually finances nuclear reactors, just one, if it just finances one nuclear reactor, what would it cost? $2 or $3 billion? Hardly anything, right? So it's going to happen. There's going to be someone out there with a spare $2 or $3 billion to kick to Rolls-Royce or any one of these other small modular nuclear reactor makers. And what they're going to get out of it is proof to the world that Bitcoin can actually increase the energy supply in the world in a way that's sustainable, in a way that is efficient. And what you'll have there, the assumed causality, in the same way that presuasion works against people and Bitcoin, it can work for us. Because you can start to see that we can have unlimited energy, unlimited, free, basically free. I mean, very cheap if we produce enough of it, right? Supply and demand, it's that simple. If we start increasing energy and it's bound to Bitcoin finance, the assumed causality will be clear in everyone's mind. We've solved energy crisis with Bitcoin financing. And survival will then be clear that Bitcoin standard can actually help inform a utopic world. So we're now contrasting Bitcoin utopia with this carbon credit, be careful about how much energy you use world. And then finally, right, the cognitive closure. Whereas now, you must rely on institutions in order to make sure you have survival because you've assumed the world is going to end because of the energy being produced, which is being promoted by, spyware. Instead of that, instead of cognitive closure happening upon the institutions, we actually start seeing it be a question of personal responsibility. So each time when you go down this path, the persuasion of Bitcoin will actually bring you to a place where personal responsibility is the natural result. Instead of institutional reliance, you actually start realizing that your money can be backed by your own brain and not by bots, not by institutions that control the bots. You can actually use your own thoughts. And again, we're not talking about the world of do your own research again, right? So I am not telling you that if you go down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, suddenly you'll have the answers to vaccines, masks, medicine, none of that stuff, right? But it will make the institutions sharing that information more reliable so that we can rely on them again, so that we're not going to have to be left in a position like we were left in COVID doing our own research. Because it's not a good look. It's not a good look. We're not good at it, right? I'm not good at it. I don't know anything about vaccines. Why do I have to learn about vaccines? I've had to learn a lot about vaccines, but I don't ever want to do that again in my life. I don't ever want to have to do my own research about things I have no idea about. None. Zero. Nothing. No clue. We're all just guessing, right? And we're all operating out of fear, and we're all doing our best. The people who got the vaccine, the people who didn't get the vaccine, the people who get electric cars because they think the world's going to end, the people who are like me and drive a V8 and you know, don't want to get stuck in a world of minus, you know, it's minus 40 where I get, right, where I live. Electric cars are, even though they're all over the place up here, by the way, all over the place. You know, I'm a little happier with my V8 engine. So all this to say, and look how much worse it can get. Here's just another story of this presuasion, and I want to mention it before we move on. And this happened just a couple of days ago. So on the 3rd, the New York Times wrote a story about an elections software company. And here was the title. This is just Monday. This is on Monday. New York Times on Monday. How a tiny elections company became a conspiracy theory target. Right? So right away, they're moving you past the responsibility of this little elections company, this tiny elections company, right? So they're already putting you in the focused illusion spot here, right? And then you know, that's what's gone wrong with them, right? These people are against them. So, but one day later, just one day later, New York Times again. I won't even mix news sources. Their headline of the same company went from how a tiny elections company became a conspiracy theory target to the next day, where it became election software executive arrested on suspicion of theft. Well, what did he do? What did he do? Here's what he did. Eugene Yu, CEO of Conic, was given a sole source $2.645 million contract to implement poll chief in LA County on the exact same day the county got $8.2 million in Zuck bucks. What? What? Does that mean Zuckerberg paid the county, and then they got the deal? I think so. I think that's what it means, right? And Wisconsin has already proven that Facebook influenced the election. Like illegally influenced the election, right? As I understand, that's already been proven. Now look that up, because I don't want to mislead anybody, right? I have no proof at all that the 2020 thing had any trouble. I have none. I have no proof. I've never seen any proof. The only thing I've ever seen is what happened in Wisconsin, which I believe did end in some responsibility and issues for Facebook, but you'll have to look it up, because I sort of forget. But anyway, the point is, you can use this presuasion piece on any, you know, here we did it with dollars and global warming because the correlation is so clear. But elections, right? You can do it on elections, you know. Conspiracy theorists believe election company is in trouble and did a bunch of stuff, but they're conspiracy theorists, so it's them, right? And they've got trouble. They're fascists. So your brain will automatically say, well, the fascists are harassing someone, right? So what do? You know, we gotta help the people being harassed by fascists, right? And then the cognitive closure, throw them in jail, right? Throw them in jail. So it can happen all the time on any subject, and it does happen all the time on any subject. But luckily, we're getting rid of the bots. And if we get rid of the bots, the bot-backed dollars could die, and we might get some brain-backed Bitcoin, which we love. Let's see the chat. Let's see what's going on. Huru says, Kim.com tweeted about this. It was a coordinated attack. He has proof. Apocalypse Never. Yeah, thanks, Indemnity. That was the book that Michael Schellenberger wrote, Apocalypse Never. A great title. Here's from Audio Innovation, New York Times equals toilet media. I wouldn't put, no, that's a compliment. Toilet media is the best these days. I mean, you go, you know, like Elon, what do they call Elon Musk? The porcelain throne of marketing or something like that, right? Which, as I understand, almost all of Elon's marketing is actually, you know, he's the sole marketer, right? None of the companies have any marketing division. And he's joked before that he gets all his marketing done on the toilet, which is really funny. Now we've got, Audio Innovation says the propaganda ain't working anymore. New York Times is dead on its feet. Yeah, that's it. So Toilet Media, don't agree with, but dead on its feet, you got it. Huru, had he simply offered them money, he wouldn't have gotten those kinds of replies. Yeah. In the meantime, these guys are still richer than these writers will ever be. Well, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. And which makes it hilarious that they would sit and laugh at them. Like, you think Larry, this is how rich Larry Ellison is, or maybe how modestly Steve Jobs lived in his life. But when Steve Jobs used to go on Larry Ellison's yacht in San Francisco Bay, Steve Jobs lived in a modest house, no security, didn't even have locks on the doors, all that kind of stuff. And his kid used to say, Steve Jobs' kid used to say, "Oh, are we going to our rich Uncle Larry's house?" Our rich Uncle Larry. And I mean, I think Steve Jobs was richer because of the Disney thing, but he was a very rich guy, right? Very rich guy. So there you go. All right, guys. That's all I got for today. Everyone have a great day. Thanks for showing up. We'll see you again tomorrow. I got to head out and do a few things today. All right, team.